I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call Post-War Polynesia. Although the roots of the tiki craze can be traced back to the late 18th century when explorers returning from their adventures throughout the South Seas brought back tales of their far-off encounters, the idea as we know it wouldn't be fully realized until the 1930s with the opening of Donn's Beachcomber Cafe. The cafe was opened by Ernest Raymond Beaumont Gant, a world traveler, bootlegger, and pal of the Hollywood elite who sought to bring a little bit of the South Seas mystique back to the States. Mixing complicated cocktails made from secret ingredients that the drinker would have trouble guessing, Ernest, who later changed his name to Don Beach, wanted to bring a little of his island-hopping adventure to the big city. Maybe he figured getting you liquored up would help to sell the illusion, or at least make it more fun. Today's block was curated by co-producers Alex Lamb and Max Well of Surf Monkey Films. Their latest documentary project, The Donn of Tiki, is a study on the legend of Donn Beach and the origins of the U.S.'s fascination with Polynesian culture. Testing a theory on the sailing techniques of ancient explorers, a crew of Norwegian sailors build a bamboo and balsa wood boat and brave the South Seas in an effort to prove that it's possible that people could have migrated from what is now South America to Polynesia. Thor Heyerdahl leads the courageous explorers in the Academy Award-winning documentary Kon-Tiki from 1950. In the Pacific theater of World War II, a nurse falls in love with an older Frenchman only to find herself pulling away when she finds out he is the father of two mixed-race children. Yeah, I know, right? The audience is encouraged to take baby steps toward understanding this concept and are presented with a lot of songs, camera filters, and jangling keys to distract them. Based loosely on James A. Michener's Tales of the South Seas, Mitzi Gaynor tries to wash that man right out of her hair in the 1958 musical South Pacific. A prim and proper young lady from Boston travels to French Polynesia to locate her long-lost father, majority stockholder in the family business, and father to 3 young half-siblings. Everyone on the island will have to go to madcap lengths to protect her delicate sensibilities. Hijinks ensue. John Wayne, Lee Marvin, and Cesar Romero star in Donovan's Reef from 1963. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me as always is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Hey, aloha.
Aloha.
That kind of works, right?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, definitely. Oh, fantastic. Today we have a very special episode with a special returning guest. And I'd go so far as to say a friend of the show, right, at this point, definitely.
Yeah.
You've been listening to every episode, right?
Yeah, every episode, all 42, right?
Well, we had this person on during our discussion of what's the greatest action-adventure film of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And now he's returning along with another very special guest, and they're going to be discussing a bit of an adventure of their own. Jeremy, would you mind doing the introduction?
Yeah. So we've got the team of Alex and Max. They've been working together for how long has it been, guys? Like 15 years.
Something like that.
We're happy to have both you guys on and talk about these movies you brought for us, and then maybe a little bit about what you're working on. So, Alex Lamb and Max Well, welcome.
Hey,
aloha. Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
Mahalo.
Very exciting talking about these films. I believe it was brought up on the last show. Jeremy was drinking something, and I think, Alex, you had something as well.
But I had some zombies, yeah.
Some zombies,
I was drunk
yes.
by the end of that show.
So, I mean, it was appropriate to talk about your project. I'd love, we could start there, or we could talk about the films that we're going to talk about first, but I'd love to hear about your project first to get started, yeah?
Yeah, so we've been working on this documentary about Donn Beach, the founding father of Tiki, and Tiki drinks specifically. He was kind of the creator of that, mixing different rums and fruit juice, and maybe not the creator, but he made it really popular and kind of changed the cocktail culture in America in the 1930s. So we're doing a documentary about his life and interviewing a lot of people that he knew, people who are influenced by him today. And it's been a wild ride. He's a fascinating guy and full of surprises.
Yeah, we're deep into the Donn wormhole, as it were.
Does that
right
wormhole
now.
include drinking all of the drinks during all of these shoots that you're on, or is this?
There is a bit of that.
It's a bonus, for sure. Yeah.
It's hard when you
Or
when you
perhaps
go
the
to
reason you started doing it. Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's true. When you go to a tiki bar and shoot the bartender talking about Donn Beach, it's very hard to avoid a cocktail.
Very interesting subject matter, and today we're associating our films with that around, I guess, the U.S.'s love of Polynesia around this time, or how it kind of came and became this big cultural thing for the U.S. So those films that we're watching and talking about today are Kon-Tiki from 1950. There is a 2012 film version of the same events, but that's not the one. South Pacific from 1958, and Donovan's Reef from 1963. A few firsts on this show. I wanted to take note of that. I think this is our first documentary, right?
No, we had the Dune documentary.
Right, sorry. So our second documentary, but this is our first mid-movie intermission with overtures. I would say that was that long that we got our first intermission.
Probably. This is our first John Ford film, I think.
There you go.
How about John Wayne?
you go.
Have you done any other
We
John
have not
Wayne
had
movies?
a John Wayne film.
How about Henry Ford, the founder
Henry
of Ford Motor Company?
So for the listeners, when I wrote the email pitching these movies, I was like, oh yeah, there's a Henry Ford movie with John Wayne, you know, and everybody gave me shit.
Well, let's get into starting with the movies. Let's start with Kon-Tiki, being chronologically the first one. What an incredible documentary this was, an Academy Award-winning documentary when it was released. But I think over our text messages we exclaimed as much as we could about how insane this project was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Going too far. Yeah. Well, real quick, but maybe before we start doing that, and I do want to dive into Kon-Tiki first, but do you guys want to talk about a little bit, why you put these movies together and why this block in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these movies. Well, first of all, I hadn't seen any of these movies, and they're all movies. They're all movies that I've wanted to watch, especially working on this Donn Beach project. Like movies that have come up that I've read about, and they all kind of show sort of a different side of America's fascination with Polynesia. Kind of, it's like as our fascination progressed and evolved, these movies kind of changed also. So I think that it's kind of interesting. These three movies in particular, I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and I would say this kind of ties in really well sort of into the Donn Beach timeline as well.
Yeah.
Like, he opened his first bar in 1933, and that was sort of this beachcomber tropical style bar. And then there were a lot of imitators that sort of popped up over the next decade or so. And then once we got into World War II, obviously Michener's book, South Pacific, was a huge hit. And I think the book came out in 1947, I think. And then the musical, and then the film, which is based on the musical. But while this was happening, Donn, right around that time, Donn opened a new restaurant in Waikiki. And the America just became obsessed with this kind of like Polynesian look and style.
And Donn and Michener were friends.
I guess they were buddies. They knew each other.
Yeah. Later on in life, like I think Michener came and stayed on Donn's property in Hawaii for a little while he was writing.
What was his property like? Did you guys get into that? I'd love to know how that guy lived.
We haven't quite gotten to a Donn Beach property yet, as far as where he lived. That's on the agenda, but that's like our second phase of production, which we're about to launch a Kickstarter for, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like, we were talking about just in terms of the overall scope of this episode. It's like we're kind of exploring this post-war fascination and sort of zeitgeist of, what Polynesia, kind of became in the minds of Americans, and a lot of that has to do with some of the tiki bar stuff that happened right after Prohibition ended, and the fact that the style of bar became like extremely popular and kind of awakened in people's minds or imaginations a lot of different possibilities. And then on top of that, World War II and in the sort of the Pacific front of that, there all the island hopping and the GIs did, and all the reports people were reading throughout the war. South Pacific itself, the movie anyway, came out right as Hawaii was going to become a state. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because for Don Beach himself, I guess before he was Don Beach, he kind of did this sailing around the world thing, is like kind of a walkabout or whatever. And supposedly the story was you'd take this money and go to college, or you know what, I'll put it on a boat and I'll just sail around the world and see what happens. And then kind of on that journey, spent the majority of that time apparently in Polynesia. And, perhaps some of that fascination may have come out of, and this is purely speculative, but like come out of expanding the territorial map of the United States, which sort of kicked off with the Spanish-American War and a lot of the stuff that Teddy Roosevelt was getting us into. And, places like the Philippines and Hawaii were American colonies, just like, Puerto Rico and whatever. And you can kind of see like how maybe, reading about those travels and whatever would kind of like spur him on to want to see what's going on out there and then get excited about it once he's there. And, of all of his travels, it seemed like Polynesia sort of, left the biggest impression in his heart. And as an interesting like segue, I guess, into our first film here, Kon-Tiki, which is a documentary of this, I guess, Norwegian, or I don't know, they were Scandinavian anyway. These guys,
Norwegian.
Norwegian, yeah.
They were.
His name was Thor, man. The guy's a beast.
In a way, kind of like almost gives us a point of view a little bit of Don's journey out there. Although their perspective on it was a little bit different. They were trying to essentially, recreate what potentially people did, for 2,000, 3,000 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his theory, right, was that people basically Polynesia at the time, everyone just kind of accepted that Polynesia was populated by people from Asia, that they had moved down into these islands. And his theory was that people came from Peru. Mm-hmm. And people said that was impossible. And he was like, well, I'm gonna build a raft and I'm gonna do it. And if I die, then you're right. And if I don't die, then... And that was essentially what he did. It was insane.
It's pretty awesome.
I was sold on the 1950 animations of the trade winds going north and west, and I'm like, yeah, that works.
Yeah.
I was actually amazed at how well that stuff holds up. Like, it kind of just looks like something that you might see today as just a stylized look
of that era, or they would make it look like that. Yeah, totally.
It was very cool.
Well, and they did such a good job. I mean, the movie's less than an hour or something, right? I mean, isn't it really short?
It's like 57,
58
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's pretty wild that he's able to pack so much into that. And like the amount of footage they had, it's like, well, especially like there's that moment where like because what happens is that we were talking about this a little bit, but that there's these trade winds that kind of just essentially push this raft. And they almost have no control over the boat.
And it cannot stop.
Yeah.
It gets it gets locked into that lane and it just goes.
Do not put your boat to the back of this boat, because that boat will far outpace you.
Well, and then there's that moment where they have the little rubber dinghy or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're just going to get some wide shots of this boat. And like the boat's just like flying away from them.
Luckily,
Yeah.
they got a line out to him, or they'd have been gone. They'd have been in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's the part that was like killing me. I was like, wait, they're shooting this while they're like paddling for their lives?
Yeah. Real
Yeah.
documentary filmmakers.
One guy was rowing, and he's like, "Don't stop! Don't stop! This is gold."
Don't stop filming. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Good
this was
shots,
true.
too.
Yeah,
Like, solid shots. And they
Yeah.
like everything was pretty well composed. Like, very impressive.
I was kind of
Yeah.
amazed that they were able to have an hour-long film, and really like 45 minutes of the movie is shots of the same 5 or 6 guys on a small raft in the middle of the ocean, right?
Yeah.
But the storytelling is so good, it continues to be entertaining.
But I love that they they use the techniques of those people from that era. They didn't use anything current, no motors, nothing like that. They just they made a sailboat out of bamboo and a bunch of wet wood, right? Or drenched wood.
boa.
Yeah,
Balsa wood.
balsa logs.
Balsa wood. Yeah, sorry, that's what it is. I just thought that was interesting that and a lot of the things that they encountered along the way, including the flying fish that would just jump up onto the boat and basically be their dinner every day. Like when you think about but that wouldn't have happened with a boat with a motor, right? It would have scared those
Right.
fish away, or they would have avoided it. So it's just brilliant,
Yeah,
That was a
Yeah.
really cool detail, like about how, like, if you strip away all that technology,
They're not afraid of you.
You then are able to sort of sustain yourself because there'd be all these like other ways of collecting food and water.
They said most of the time there were fish that were just following them, just riding along with them underneath as a little bit of protection, and they just became one with the sea and the fish. It was great.
They would just throw a line in and be like, dinner. And then there was a lot of footage of them just beating the hell out of fish.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a little disturbing.
But those
Yeah.
fish would have kicked the shit out of him, right? Those sharks were like batting around on the bow of the ship, and exciting stuff.
But yeah, I love that they didn't just edit to like hit it once and it's dead. Like they kept cutting back. I mean, it's like beating it with a club.
Plus, it was sound designed, right? Because all
Yeah.
that stuff was done later, and so they had to find that right sound to hit that fish.
Yeah.
What does it sound like when you hit a fish with a wooden mallet?
And there was a constant like water sound they had throughout the entire
Yep.
movie. It was almost just consistent tone.
Well, and they used the sharks to like filter water. They like got water
Right.
out of the shark, and they were like, "This water will be okay to drink." I'm like, how do you know that? Like,
It was only partially briny or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was the dolphin fish. It was the
oh, it was the
fluid
dolphin
Right.
fish.
from the
yeah.
lymph gland of the dolphin fish.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's not very good, but it will keep
Yeah,
you
they're
alive.
like it tastes horrible, but if you were gonna die, and they like, there's a lot of stuff that you had to kind of take with a grain of salt, because like it's like these Norwegian guys in the 50s, and they're like, well, it's the same for a European or a primitive man. You need water, and it's like, well, yeah, because you're both men, like
Human.
yeah, there's no difference.
Actually, real quick, that is like a perfect through line through all these movies. Like, yes, people other than white people are also human too.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
Exactly. We're all the same.
I would say that's definitely the thesis, and the
No, but I love how like they were doing these extremely unnecessary experiments. Like,
oh yeah,
there were 6 guys on this boat, and 2 of them, for no reason whatsoever, decided to like, yeah, I'll just the entire trip eat these these K rations or whatever. It's like this nutrient paste, just to see if I live. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they didn't make it very clear. I kind of wondered if like the military had kind of sponsored
I think they
part
must
of their
have, yeah.
part of
It was
their
a multi-country sponsorship, I thought.
right.
Yeah, but how much money did they need
Yeah.
to like, you know what I mean, to lash that boat together? Which, the guys in Peru did all the work for him. So
Hey man, that's margins, man. You got to understand how margins work. Like you could put a price on anything.
Yeah, they
Okay.
needed film. They needed film, man.
Oh yeah, that's true. There you go. They needed film. They needed to finish this goddamn documentary. Listen, documentaries aren't cheap, okay?
Yeah.
And they said a bunch of footage was lost at the end of that. They said that there was like a whole section that they had still photos.
Like inside the little hut or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I also read that later there is color footage it's just somewhere that hasn't been shown yet or something. Like there's potentially
wow.
color footage of that trip somewhere. That'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I mean, I guess you could even apply that logic about like what the hell are they doing this for to the trip in and of itself. It's like, why were they doing this? Just for a bet. I don't know, like just to see if it happened. But one way they're like, I want to see how far we can sustain this. And we're doing, they were drinking like 60% fresh water, 40% seawater at one point. Like, why?
Yeah.
But it was ultimately to prove that the primitive people could do it, right? On whatever rations the ocean provided them.
Well, that part was sponsored by the British Navy, I think they said.
Right.
Or the Air Force or something.
Or, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a thing where they're like, okay, what if our guys are lost at sea?
You can tell we were all paying attention very closely to these details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but why? Why did these guys like? Is it because like the Navy was gonna like fuck with them if they didn't do this stuff?
Like we're gonna shoot you down.
Yeah.
if you go through. You go through this current here, you're not going to make it.
Right.
No, I think I think some of it was just like the Navy was like, hey, while you're out there, do you mind trying some of these survival tactics we've been like knocking around in the office, like trying to see if maybe they'll work? You'll be out there maybe, and you might die, but since you're out there anyway, try it.
Right. But then
me and Jerry got a bet
They could just say, "Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we did all that. We did all that." And maybe that's what they did do. Who knows? But like, like...
And then they set their little tent on fire with the stove, which I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that they did where I was like, this kind of goes back to the dinghy also. Like, it didn't really make sense. Like, that shouldn't have been a discovery that like going back to the dinghy. If the boat's going this fast, you can't row that fast. Right. That shouldn't have been something that they had to find out by launching off. They're like, oh, holy shit, we can't row that fast.
Modern man doesn't know that stuff then. That's what primitive man would know.
Yeah.
They weren't thinking straight. They were surviving on lymph node juice and military rations.
Might have been a little squirrely at that point.
But I feel like the same thing with like the stove setting the boat on fire. It's like, well, yeah, you left the stove on. Like that wasn't like part of the adventure. That was just a dumb guy leaving the stove on. Yeah.
Which branch of the military asked them to prove that part?
And then they had the other star of the movie was this Spanish-speaking parrot who spoke with a Norwegian accent, right? Yeah. And I couldn't figure out if that parrot showed up. Did they explain it, or did they bring that parrot?
Right. Yeah. I was wondering, and did it just get caught up on the boat and then had to stay on the boat because it was in the middle of the ocean at that point?
That's what I assumed. But then they were like, well, we could bring him back to his cage inside. I'm like, wait, there's a cage?
No. I think that was somebody's like pet that they got while they were in Peru. But I now I don't remember specifically what the what the circumstances were for it, but.
We'll cut to a clip.
We had a female on board. Her name was Lorita, and she was a South American parrot.
Yeah. A couple other quick things. Before we leave this one behind, how insane were the sort of like the wicker basket shark cages, or like when they were like dipping the guy in by his feet, like holding him by his feet while he was going underneath the boat. With the sharks swimming around, it's like, what in the hell?
Wasn't that to remove something from the bottom of the boat?
I think it was to check the lashings.
And they had to get him out because if they didn't, it would come back like that fish that they showed an example of. It was just a half a fish left after it came out. Could you imagine just the legs coming up out of the water?
It's like fucking Evil Dead 2. Just like,
exactly. Or like Piranha. It's like... Now that would be a hell of a documentary.
Also, the whale shark. I mean, of course, like watching stuff now, they're like, oh, whale sharks are very like peaceful and nice if you can like swim with them and stuff. And they're like, like, this thing's fucking crazy looking. Let's try to spear it. Like, They're like, it's giant.
Even though it's nice and gentle, it was like 6 times the size of the raft. So
Yeah.
inadvertently it could have fucked them up.
Yeah, I thought they were more worried about it bumping into them.
Yeah,
and capsizing the
kicking
boat.
it with its tail. Yeah,
But they didn't kill it, right? They just kind of got the spear in it. It took off,
And then it
the
swam
spear broke
away,
in
yeah.
half, and it just left. It's like you could not mess with that thing. It was a monster.
No.
I think
Thing was
40 feet
huge.
long. They said, or
Yeah.
just ridiculous size of these things.
yeah. And then I was thinking about how crazy it is that like the most exciting part of their journey, obviously they couldn't film because they're like getting like thrown onto this
right.
reef, right?
with the
So like
storm
it's
and, yeah.
he starts narrating. It's like, this was the most exciting part of our journey, and they just go to a map, and it's like they just show a map with like a line on it. It's like it says
Like Indiana Jones.
what day of the adventure it is, and they're like, yeah,
Well, just
it's
wait
like
till
day.
you guys get to the most exciting part of
Yeah,
your
I know.
documentary,
And we don't have
You
any
the
footage.
for it.
Yeah, I felt bad because I was like, they probably were just all hanging on for dear life at that point.
Yeah,
and that's
totally.
why they had like. He's like, no, you film it.
Yeah.
Well, the raft was almost destroyed. Like the shots
Yeah.
of the raft after it was on the reef was pretty intense.
But how would they have gotten back? That's a one-way trip, huh? If there was no, I mean, not them specifically. I'm saying anyone that didn't have a means of actually phoning someone and telling them to come pick them up.
Right.
Right. Like, is that
Yeah.
a one-way trip? And is that what they were trying to also prove?
Well, that's the thing that if the Peruvians really took this journey, like, why? Like, they couldn't have seen anything from where they are,
They were
right?
out
Like, they're
fishing
just like,
and then just got pulled
They
into
got
Polynesia.
stuck.
They got hooked.
Yeah.
They got hooked in the trade wind. Yeah. The current took them.
yeah. Actually,
Why? Because
yeah.
they had no choice.
They tried to paddle. They
Yeah.
gave it their best. Let's just stop here.
Yeah. I mean,
It looks beautiful.
yeah. I mean, it was definitely an adventure. That was my favorite, I think, of these movies because
I agree.
I mean, it was. I'm happy that I watched it. I will probably watch it again in my life. Like that was an intense documentary, and even it being so old, like, is so good.
This might be the only time I watch South Pacific. Mostly because it wasn't my ultimate favorite, but my wife loves it. So, she's a big musical person. So this was like, she really wanted to watch this with me and fell asleep in the first 15 minutes. So, but how could you fall asleep in the first 15 minutes of this movie? This is one of the craziest musical numbers ever.
Wait, are you talking about my favorite Martian dressing like Tobias Funke?
The Never Nude? Yeah, exactly. Ray Walston in the midriff showing.
Oh my God.
Man, that was quite a fantasy opener there. Like there was definitely something going on there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a lot going on there.
What ain't we got? We ain't got
And it really doesn't feel like the rest of the movie at all. I mean, that feels like a very isolated musical number for that movie. Nothing really kind of does that same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, which song was this? Is this the song where they're singing about the other island with all the women on it?
This is the very first, like, the Navy introduction, I guess. I don't know. On the island.
And they're singing to Bloody Mary or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Her face is like leather and all that.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm so confused by this song. Why is this lady smiling? They're talking so much shit on her. And
Because they're the guys with all the guns and ships and stuff.
yeah.
I guess
And
you
they're
gotta
and they're
smile.
they're buying her grass skirts that she's selling, which why? I don't know what they were doing. with
She was
them.
making mad cash, though, at the time.
She
$6,000,
was, yeah.
$8,000, she said, or something?
Something like that.
Yeah. And then they go into the song about this island, the
Bali
Bali
High.
High.
Bali High, yeah.
The famous song. Yeah.
Yeah.
And about how there's no women, and then like this group of women comes jogging by, and I was like,
Except for these ones right
later,
here.
yeah. I guess they explained it because those were nurses, and they are like off limits to the
That's
military.
when we first meet Nellie, right? Nellie's coming
Right.
from that group, yeah.
Yeah, but that just threw me off.
That was a similar scene in Donovan. Not trying to jump ahead, but that was a similar scene in Donovan's Reef when a bunch of women run by and all of a sudden the Navy guys just kind of take off. I think these are British though. At that, they just take off and start running after these women. They did the same thing in South Pacific.
Right. They were on bikes or something, and I don't know. Yeah. Same kind of gag.
How scary for them, right?
Yeah.
All these dudes start running after down the street. That sucks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about Ray Walston with that ship tattoo on his stomach.
Right.
He was showing off the whole time. Like that was pretty impressive.
That was very cool.
Yeah.
It's like that tattoo that, that's exactly what people in the 50s imagined people who have tattoos. Like, that's what it would look like. Like
This is a Navy guy, right?
Yeah.
A Navy guy. Just
This
his
guy's
whole
definitely
stomach.
a Navy guy. He's got a full like schooner on his belly button.
Oh, that's funny. Did you guys catch that the "Wash That Man Right Out of My Hair" song was, Nelly singing about Emile washing him out of her hair.
Right.
But then in Donovan's Reef, they called Cesar Romero a louse and, lice, and that's how you get rid of lice. You wash them out of your hair, and it was kind of the same character that was in both. Man,
Yeah.
Connections.
The same character, Belloc.
What's his name? Well, we call him Balosh.
Yeah.
Belloc, right? He was Belloc.
Yeah, I confused both of those guys for Belloc multiple times.
Belloc who could sing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet Belloc could really carry a tune, man. You heard him laugh when he holds that idol.
No, the crazy thing to me about this music, because I had never seen the musical. I had heard the music before because my wife also loves the musical. But I didn't realize that like a major part of the story is that this French guy who she's in love with had a wife who was Polynesian, and he's got these mixed race kids, and she has to get over her racism.
Yeah.
I was like,
That's what this was about.
I didn't either. And when she's upset about it, I didn't understand why she was like,
Right.
like, she started acting all weird, and I was like,
She
what's
couldn't
her
even
problem?
talk.
It was like her feet were on fire and she had to run away. It was like,
Yeah.
It was
And
really
I mean,
weird.
I guess part of that is just like, we're in the year 2021, and it's like, to me, I'm
Right.
like, I have no idea what her issue is here, but it was like, no, he has mixed race kids, like I can't be with him. It's such a culture shock, like
There was-
a time
there was
travel
that.
culture shock.
And then there was the John Kerr character, Cable, or
Right.
Lieutenant
Lieutenant
Cable.
Yeah.
But he was the same kind of thing, right? Like he wasn't interested in meeting someone, and then he meets a Polynesian girl, Liat, I believe was the daughter of Bloody Mary, right? And so, but it was like then he had that relationship too, and that I think that was another bit of the mixed race racism that was in this film.
It was fine when he was just getting laid, but he didn't want to marry her.
Right.
Like that was his
Right.
his whole dilemma, I guess. Was like,
Did he
Yeah.
die?
He did.
yes, yeah.
Okay, did that happen off screen, and then they just kind of cut back to him being covered up by a
They
body
cut back to
bag?
him being buried, but yeah,
buried.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, he's
okay,
being
I was
covered
a
with
little
leaves.
confused on that.
Yeah. That's a type of burial, I guess.
Yeah. It's like when you put the pig in the ground for a luau. Same thing.
Yeah.
He'll cook
He was
slowly.
being eaten, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
He's
Well, yeah,
being
that's the other
prepared.
thing. When they went to Bali High, and they're doing like this like ceremony to get the tusk out of the pig, and I was like, what? I was very confused as to like what culture these people were supposed to be. It seemed like it was such a mixture of.
Was it Tongan?
It seemed like it was a bunch of stuff.
It was like a lot of. I thought there was like a lot of African elements mixed
Yeah,
in.
and I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
It was complete nonsense.
It was just
offensive.
Hollywood, like
Yeah.
everything in the kitchen sink, like all non-white races. We'll just like put them all together.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because like both this movie and Donovan's Reef are doing this like baby steps for the audience to like try and consider that people who don't look like John Wayne are also human. What?
Right. And I mean, I guess both of these movies were could be definitely considered offensive watching them today. But also watching them, I was kind of surprised that it seemed like they were, for the time, trying to be progressive in a way. They weren't necessarily doing it the right way as we might do it today, but like the message was that it's like, no, we're all human beings, which I wasn't expecting when I started watching South Pacific. I didn't know that's what it was going to be about.
Well, I have to say, like, for a movie in 1958, I was actually kind of shocked that they did have some interracial kissing in the movie. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, it seems like that's what they were going to do, and they were going to start to imply it and then cut away. But no, that they went for it. And for a movie this old, like it definitely seemed like something that they wouldn't allow. I mean, part of the Hays Code was explicitly not showing, races mingling in any context, whether it's just like, casually or whatever, unless it's like a servant or something. And Jesus. So, and so this was definitely one of those things where it was like, it was one of the earlier ones. Now, apparently the year before, 1957, Island in the Sun had Sidney Poitier
Weezer.
and Weezer. And Sidney Poitier and the lead singer of Weezer kissed, and that apparently was like one of the bigger on-screen kisses for breaking that barrier. But this movie 2, I guess, was pretty early in that.
And this movie, I mean, they probably had already done it on stage, right? In the play, like a couple years before.
Yeah. Although, who knows? I mean, because sometimes with Broadway may not have. I mean, it may have had certain other standards, but like not the Hays Code in particular. And who knows?
Also, like these actors weren't doing like brown face or anything.
Right.
It wasn't like they were having
Natalie Wood in The Searchers. Or
right.
True.
But I don't believe Liat was from that area, right? She looked from somewhere else, the actress.
She was French, I guess.
She also looked really young. Like, I kind of got this, like, Jeffrey Epstein Island vibe from Valley High.
This is the island.
Yeah, people show up on a boat, and then this lady's like, oh, why don't you go into this room with this
That was kind of what was
girl.
being implied there, right? Like, the very first song about, hey, you know what? There are women over there if you guys want to get
sexy.
laid. Yeah. But I love the, like, speaking of that you sexy thing, it's like the first time she sees him, like, all of a sudden we cut to her point of view and she has cataracts, and we're just like, there's this like weird smudging all over the lens.
Oh man, they did so much of that in this movie. This like weird vignette, softening thing. Yeah.
Also,
a lot of
Max,
color
like,
correction.
Yeah, with the cinematography, it seemed like they had lots of like weird filters and stuff. Like, even though they were shooting it on a tropical beach, but they were like, let's make it look more tropical. like
a tropical beach on Mars, like with purple.
Yeah.
But it was like, let's talk about the yellow sun. Not everything needs to be yellow.
So apparently the director intended for that to be a more subtle effect. And then, like, when they were producing the 35 millimeter prints, I guess Fox did it, and they just went really big with it, and they couldn't undo it at that point. Like, the movie, the movie had been made, and they shipped them all out.
They didn't have Command Z back then?
Yeah.
I will say, I was amazed at how good that film looked, though. I mean, they shot it on 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
And
It was very beautiful.
The beach scenes, especially, the divide of the water on the, in the beach, and they were just some really great shots. Even though, I don't think Bali High was a real island out there with a background that they painted on, but
the matte painting.
Right.
That was
matte
cool.
painting, that's what they're. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, because everything else like looked so good, all of a sudden, like some of those places where they were were being more artificial, like makes it look even worse because everything else looks so great.
Yeah, and then there were some like. All the sets were kind of like those sets, that you see a lot, especially in like the 50s, and when things come from musicals where it's like the set only has what's in front of you, like nobody ever looks this way.
It's like very 2D.
Like a sitcom set, basically. It's like as long as you're looking that way.
It's only 3-walled, right?
Three walls. Yeah.
Here's a question: Did you guys find it weird? There were a couple of musical numbers where they had they were just addressing the camera, like they were playing straight to lens as they were singing. There were two maybe musical numbers where they did that, and I found it
when Belloc
odd.
first sang, I think was one of them, right?
That might have been one of them, and when the gal, what's her name, Nellie, when she sang on the beach, and then the girls end up like dancing behind her. Like the first half of it, she's just singing right to lens.
Wasn't that the Wash That Man Out of My Hair?
Wash that man out of my hair.
Yeah.
I liked that shower. That was a really cool shower that it was like the trunk of a tree that was
Disneyland
hollowed
shower.
out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's like what the
It looked-
Flintstones would use.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an elephant with
You
his
just
trunk on
pull
top.
the trunk,
Yeah.
his tongue out or something.
Yeah. There was a button on the side of the tree that was like cold, medium, and hot. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah.
How the hell did they get
What
that
were the
to
heating
work?
elements for that?
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie was quite long, huh?
It was long.
It felt long. I mean, and it knew it was long, you know? I had trouble figuring out if the video on my cable was working at the beginning because for 5 minutes
me
it's
too.
just
Yeah.
overture and no video.
The overture
Yeah.
And the
just
same thing happened.
with
Same
Black
thing
Leader. It
happens
was like,
after
what
the
the hell?
intermission. You still
Yeah,
have
yeah,
that
yeah.
set of black. And it's just like you're at the show, right? Live when they have the overture and the curtain
Yeah.
hasn't gone up yet. That's where we're at. But this is a movie, you know. Like
Yeah.
I was kind of like taken out of it, and I will admit that I skipped ahead.
I did too, and I was kind of, and I kind of was like, oh sweet, because I knew this movie was like 3 hours long. It's like maybe that got rid of like 10 minutes, you know?
6 minutes total.
Yeah. But I was like,
almost done.
Is the picture not working? Because I hear it. Yeah, I was like, I expected to see credits or something. It was just black.
You start to get
and
that little
music.
panic, like, oh god, am I have to replace a cable or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
I immediately blamed myself for not watching this like earlier, and I'm like, am I not going to be able to watch this today because
Yeah.
it's going to take forever to work or something?
I'm not gonna make it.
Yep.
Well, I will say this film was like 2.5 hours plus, but it only felt like 3.5 hours to me.
They somehow managed to cram 2.5 hours into 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you feel like it's done, and then intermission. You're like, oh, I'm almost, and I feel, you know, a lot of people worked really hard to make this movie happen,
Sure.
and I'm acting like it's a
As with
horrible
all
thing,
movies, yes.
horrible thing that I had to watch it. But I really thought, I was like, okay, like we're getting somewhere. I've been watching this for like 3 hours now, and then it's intermission.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like the first half of the movie before the intermission, you know, without that opening scene in the plane, you almost wouldn't even know this is supposed to be World War II. It's, you know, it's just the straight kitchen sink drama. Like when I was watching it, I kind of forgot about the World War II aspect of it, and it was like, you know, lost in the sort of absurdity of the love stories.
The only thing
Yeah.
that kind of kept that going were the was the major or whoever was, you know, sending Emil out on the, you know, the trip to the island to look over the Japanese, right, to spot out. That was the only.
But I think
time
that comes after.
It
right?
does. It does.
Okay.
I'm just saying that was the only thing that reminded me that this was during. You know, that time or that era. Yeah.
Yeah, aside from that, it just kind of feels like MASH or something.
Exactly.
You're like, wait, do they ever have to worry about like fighting? I loved that, like, a production designer though was like, I have a really cool idea. I'm gonna put a doll without a head hanging upside down in this jet. And that's how you're gonna know, like, these guys are badass army dudes.
I didn't even notice that.
Oh, that was like the only thing I could look at that whole scene. Like because it was so creepy and it didn't fit in the rest of the movie at all. But it was like it was a head, like a decapitated doll hanging upside down, like it was like dice in a car.
It was the kid from Toy Story, like the neighbor from Toy Story,
We don't like being blown up, Sid.
like just mutilating
I thought there
toys.
was a head.
Was there a head?
I thought there was a head. I don't know.
Maybe there was a head. It was creepy nonetheless. It was weird.
What was creepier, that or him chewing on a cigar with the plastic wrap still on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that I was like,
That guy could land anywhere, but he couldn't figure out how to smoke a cigar.
Well, I was like, maybe he has one cigar and he just really wants it to last. So he's like, he has the oral fixation. He's like, I need something in my mouth in order to fly a plane.
Yeah. Right. Well, he actually, he was totally fearless. He didn't, he didn't give a shit about death. Like, he was like, oh yeah, we'll just prove it to this guy for no reason. We'll dip down a few hundred feet and get shot at.
Just get covered by anti-aircraft shells.
Like, next time I'll just take your word for it, buddy.
Yeah, well, that's the other theme, right? It goes back to Thor wanting to just be like, no, I want to prove this.
Yeah.
I have no,
There you go.
I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna. No, and how about when what's his name with the ship tattoo falls out of the plane, right? And then he doesn't pull his parachute cord, and they just yell
like,
at him, pull the cord.
Which one?
Say it again.
Yeah, and then he yells back up at them, which cord, as if he could hear them.
Yes.
It's all like wind and propeller noise.
Yeah, I was like, maybe on the stage this worked, but like as a movie, this all of a sudden it just turns into a flat out like Wile E. Coyote cartoon. I was
He pulls it out and an anvil comes out.
Also, I'm pretty sure if you're traveling at like 500 miles an hour when they get to the guy, you can't just stick your head out the window and like have a conversation with somebody.
Right, you're pulling back stumps at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
That was definitely my favorite moment in the movie. It was him yelling back up, like, as he's falling to his death.
And that whole sequence was my favorite thing, because he lands in the ocean, and then the guys on the plane are like, oh, toss him a boat. And then and the boat falls like...
They'd be like 6 miles away.
Out of the range of their...
It's like that whole sequence was written by like a 5-year-old with toys, and he's like, "Well, this guy can just throw a boat out of the plane to that guy."
Right.
So it's going to be one of those days, huh?
Should we step out to Donovan's Reef and
We'll take
head to the saloon?
Yeah. Okay, so I made the mistake of watching the trailer for this movie. And
I did too.
I forget how bad trailers were, like in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I saw this trailer and I was like, oh God, this is going to be horrible. And then I started watching it and I actually really liked it. And I was like, oh, I wish I watched this before South Pacific.
Yeah.
I did watch it before South Pacific. I liked it. I liked it too. I mean, I know there was some problematic moments in this one too. John Wayne kind of is a bit of a tower of a man in this movie that doesn't have much of a light touch, but bit of an aggressive dude, but overall,
but he's okay. He's okay because the first scene is him giving fish to a nun. So you're like, anything he does, you're like, well, he gave fish to that nun at the beginning of the movie. He's a nice guy. Yeah,
his save the cat moment. Fish the nun.
Yeah.
I guess the movie starts off with a really funny moment where it's like Lee Marvin is having some like insane banter with this guy.
Oh yeah.
And then, beats the shit out of him and is about to like, go AWOL, jump off the ship. And what he does is like, instead of diving into the water, he sort of like belly flops his way in. It's like, what are you doing, dude?
It was pretty refreshing seeing Lee Marvin in this kind of a role after watching Dirty Dozen. What a different role for him.
Yeah.
He was very funny.
He was great.
Yeah. And then that was and then I kind of, so I had watched this movie, I started it, and then I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to, I like looked at the time, I was like, I can't get through this whole movie tonight. So I stopped it and I started it again the next morning. I had forgotten about that scene the only scene I watched where he jumps off. So I just start watching the movie and it's John Wayne, and then they hear this noise and they look through a telescope and they're like, he's here. And I'm like, who's here? Because I had forgotten that he jumped off a boat and was swimming to shore.
Yeah, well, that's why you need to watch them all in one sitting.
Yeah, I know. That was my fault. Also, it was a very, very complicated relationship with a very long setup, and it didn't really make any sense.
Absolutely no payoff,
like this guy comes to the island.
The entire movie.
This guy comes to the island. John Wayne's like, kids, get in the truck. I'm taking you to the house. Like this is going to be some crazy shit that's happening. He drives them back and he's like, stay here. It's safe. And I was like, who is this guy? Then he drives to the bar and gets in a brawl with the guy. And then the guy's like, happy birthday. And they're just old buddies who have the same birthday and fight in the bar. every
On
time
their
they see
birthday-
each other,
on
like
their birthday. Yeah.
on their birthday. And I
Right.
was like,
And they don't know why they're fighting. That they've had a history of just doing this every year, and that's all there is to it.
It's tradition.
Yeah.
it was, and a lot of stuff in this movie didn't make a lot of sense, but the beginning of this movie was the most confusing, maybe like 20 minutes of my movie-going life. But maybe most of it's because I went to sleep after seeing the dude jump off the boat, and maybe that was the missing link that would have made it all fit together.
No, I think they needed a couple more drafts on this one. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about it, like just like structurally speaking, the entire conceit is okay. Exact same, scenario from South Pacific. The Jack Warden, the grandpa from Problem Child, has 3 kids with a Polynesian woman who's dead, and he has to hide that from one of his estranged daughter because inheritance and this and that, and then about the 40-minute mark, Jack Warden meets with his daughter Amelia, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't give a shit about inheritance." And it's like, well, wait,
Yeah.
so the movie's over, or
Yeah.
no, we still
Signs
got
the
an hour to
papers
go.
and it's done.
It wasn't even a discussion.
Yeah.
It's like, well, so then why were we teasing out the rest of this movie? Like,
Yeah. I mean,
that was the central conflict.
Yep. Solid.
not to keep going back to it, but it's such a perfect movie that this is how they should have done it.
Yeah.
But if you think about Raiders of the Lost Ark, if they get the Ark in the middle of the movie, the movie's done.
True.
And that essentially happened in this movie, but they're like, let's keep going. Let's just keep going and see what happens.
No, he's got it, and now it's with the top men. And what else do we have to do? Well, we could fix the roof. I don't know. There's another bar fight we could do. We could turn it into a Christmas movie for no reason. We could do all kinds of things, guys.
I thought that was a Christmas scene, and I wasn't sure because they were cutting down a palm tree. But then they started singing Christmas songs on the way back, right? I was like, oh,
Yep.
okay.
It's like Clark Griswold on the way back.
Merry Christmas.
Picking
They
up
got
the
chased by a bunch of hillbillies.
Look over there, kids.
Yeah.
There's a joke that'll read on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I mean, according to the synopsis, though, it says that Donovan, John Wayne's character, and then Gil Hooley, was Lee Marvin's character.
Right.
We're just trying to keep Doc Dedham, your Jack Warden person, trying to keep him from being found out as he was hiding out from this person. But ultimately, it didn't matter.
It was another thing that went completely over my head with my 2021 brain being like, I'm so confused as to why he's going to lose his inheritance because of a morality clause that in Boston they still find to be very important. They're like, well, what is he doing that's immoral? Oh, he had a wife who wasn't white.
Right.
That was
Yeah,
essentially
exactly.
that was the problem, and he was going to lose his inheritance.
Right, but I mean,
because of it.
they do spell that out in the movie. I mean, even if you are looking at it with the 2021 eyes,
Yeah.
like it is spelled out there. It's just that like they run themselves into a corner and like don't bother to fix it. They're just like, yep, well, that's it, and
Yeah.
we'll keep going. And for some reason, Amelia just like won't be able to figure this out and like have to like puzzle everything out on her own for another 40 minutes.
And
Why?
and even her figuring it out, because she figures it out at the ceremony, right? That is when she figures it out.
She goes and like sees the padre kind of drunk and crying over the
at the
graves in the
grave.
morning,
Oh yeah.
which is after the sort of the rained out Christmas
Pageant.
pageant, and
Those kids were really cute.
then she like
Yeah.
she like shakes him down and gets him to confess. But then so she has this knowledge at that point. It's just
Yeah.
and then there's a whole like 2 other scenes with Cesar Romero where he's like trying to hold this over her. Or whatever. It's like, this isn't working. Like,
Yeah, he didn't have much of a point to the movie, right? Like he could have been removed, and I don't think anything would have changed.
no,
Right.
he was there to look slick.
Yeah, he did though, man.
He did.
He didn't have any paint on his mustache though. I did want to say though how John Wayne would kind of handle the lead actress in this, and he would just kind of push her along as they were walking, and in time she would literally fall. Like she would trip
Yeah.
over herself because he was just this giant, like pushing this young little girl around. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And the one at the very end, she goes to like meet up with him, and she falls off a Jeep straight on her ass. I think someone would have broke their coccyx had they fallen off. Do you remember this part?
Yes.
Like, what the?
Yeah.
It's so
and
weird.
then they're walking back. They're walking down the road, and I was like, all right, I got through this movie. It was offensive, but it wasn't as offensive as I thought it would be. And then he has to do like one more offensive thing where he basically like manhandles her into a fountain and then just starts, and she's fighting him, and then he just like makes out with her until she's in submission.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
And then roll credits. We're done.
Well, here's a fun fact I read about this film, which was that there was original material prepared for this production by James Michener, who wrote the
South Pacific.
South Pacific. So a little
I
bit
feel
of a
like
connection
Michener
there that I
was
didn't-
like the guy. People were like, well, if you want to know about Polynesia, ask this old white guy, and he...
Yeah, apparently he's not credited.
A lot of similarities though in the story, right? I mean,
They're like, hey, can you just take pieces of that story from the other one and
Yeah.
jam it into this one where it doesn't work, and we kind of break it in the middle? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
can we do that again?
So this is going to be our first John Wayne movie on the show, huh? Donovan's Reef.
It's a John Wayne and Henry Ford movie.
Yeah. Well, this is I guess the last John Wayne and John Ford collaboration. They had dozens over the years, and this is apparently the one they went out on.
Yeah, the
that
swan
was that was
song.
another thing I read about this was actually that John Ford was in such poor health during the filming of this that John Wayne ended up directing a lot of it.
Which is why it
probably-
didn't make any sense.
Probably why the direction isn't as hot as I was expecting.
It's all making sense.
Yeah, they got to the part where John Wayne's like, just have him sign over the money. He doesn't care.
Yeah. Why does he
You know,
care?
and
He actually does have a really good life here. What
Yeah.
the fuck does he want to go back to Boston for? Oh, yeah. Well, I guess that fixes the entire thing.
Yeah.
Well, can we move this to the end of the movie instead? No. Put it right here. Okay.
But now, but then there was a ceremony with the Doc's kids at the end, and it seemed like the young girl became important.
Well, yeah, because her mother
was the last royalty, right, of the island.
of the island, yep.
And
Oh, and
she
was
it was
just-
like her coming of age. Now she is
Right, it's
the
her,
princess.
Bat
Got
mitzvah
it.
or whatever.
Very cool.
Her bat mitzvah. I think that's a Polynesian term. Let's ask
Yeah.
Michener.
Yeah, I think James Michener's
Yeah.
that was the French Polynesian term for that.
So this was one of those just like weird glitch in the Matrix moments where like things keep coming up. But so Max and I were recently talking to our friend Adrian about this old song. Did you catch this, Max? The song was called "The Monkeys Have No Tails" in Zamboanga.
Yes, I meant to.
And
I meant to
and
talk
they,
about
that was the song. So that was a song about Filipinos because they would climb up the trees and get fruit, and the white people who came to the islands are like, oh, they're like monkeys without tails, which is incredibly offensive and racist. That song showed up like 5 times in this movie.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah, like it's playing on the jukebox.
It's
or
playing on the record.
turntable thing.
Playing on the
yeah,
slot
and
machine.
then John Wayne just like keeps like he'll like whistle it and then he'll sing it, and I was just like, ooh, it's that really offensive song that I had no idea existed until like a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
And now I'm hearing it over and over.
well, that's interesting because like I was thinking about that earlier, right before we started recording, but I guess that is a connection to the show you guys are putting together, which is like, because Ray Bowen, was married to a white woman, and he faced a lot of those same sort of prejudices and things that a lot of these movies were exploring.
Yeah, we talked with him about that, or we talked with Mike Bowen about that a little bit, and yeah, he told us some stories about some of the things that they faced.
Oh, well, actually, we should probably go back. I mean, did you say earlier that Ray was Filipino? You probably did when you were talking about the song, but they're
So Ray was Filipino. He was one of Don's Filipino bartenders who actually was a bartender at just about every Polynesian-themed bar in Los Angeles for like 40 years, including Christian's hut on Catalina.
Yeah.
But yes, and he opened the tiki tea, and his wife was white, and but she also was like, she sounds like one of these ladies. Jerry was her name. She sounds like one of these ladies that wouldn't take shit from anybody. Because I guess the stories that Mike told us where, people would like try to kick them out of a restaurant or something, she would kind of like
She would
fight
kick
back.
back.
And kick back. Exactly. She sounds like she was a firecracker. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to like see these movies, and I don't know. I mean, I sound like an ignorant white guy. Like, oh, it's crazy to think racism exists. But watching these movies and seeing how like these movies didn't think they were being racist.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's
Like
what I was
that's
gonna
what's
say.
crazy. That's what's crazy about it.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, they thought they were being just the opposite, right? Like, and they were
Right.
they were really trying to baby
Bring
step their
progressive.
way into, trying to get a much more racist society to think that certain people that are can also be human as well.
Yeah, it is funny. I mean, it does show you that times have changed a little bit in the last 60 years.
Right, or at least
Yeah.
what we take for granted has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned earlier a Kickstarter for your project. When does that start?
Next week. So by the time people hear this, hopefully it will be live.
That is the plan. Yeah.
Oh wow, there's some pressure on the editor, huh?
We're launching our Kickstarter. We're trying to raise funds to travel. We have a lot of interviews that we have sort of tentatively booked and that we need to travel to. Hawaii, New York, New Orleans, lots of
Georgia.
places.
And then eventually you'll do a film, right? After you do so much cool traveling.
After we take this vacation.
This is gonna be so nice.
So this is more of a GoFundMe. Go fund us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There'll be a second Kickstarter for the film, actually.
But yeah, so we're raising money for that. We're trying to, we got some cool stuff on there. We've got a tiki mug designed and created by Shag, the artist Shag, which is really cool.
Very cool.
Yep.
And we got some other cool stuff on there, some cool rewards and
Yeah, we've got some
prizes.
really cool pins based on illustrations of all these cocktails from old Donn the Beachcomber menus.
Oh, cool.
All
We got a
drinks.
tiki cocktail masterclass.
Yeah.
Yeah, with lots of these. I mean, everybody. We've been interviewing people who know better than anyone how to make these drinks. So each of them kind of does a breakdown, and we're doing that as a reward, which is kind of cool.
And if we talked about this before, I'm sorry, but how did you guys start this? Like, what started your, this adventure?
Yeah.
Well, a couple of years ago, Alex actually, I had no idea what the tiki scene was really all about, but Alex kind of started getting into some of these bars, and we had a thought about doing a little docu-series kind of covering some of these spots that, like the Tiki Tea that's been there since '61, and Tonga Hut, and a handful of other places in the LA area that we were like, oh, we could do like a 10-minute little piece on each of these places. And we started talking to people, and everybody was like, oh, it all goes back to Donn Beach. And like more and more people kept talking about Donn Beach, and we started learning
And the
about
stories they would tell were just like, there's no way that this guy actually did all these things. Like it can't be real.
Just legendary kind of stuff. Huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and also there's something interesting about this idea that what people have in their minds about tiki, and it's like, okay, that's Polynesia, that's out there somewhere, but all that was invented here in LA, right?
Yeah,
Right.
and which makes sense when you think about like Hollywood, especially
Exactly.
Hollywood like in the 30s. Like it's all a fantasy, right?
Totally.
And that's what like gave it its initial taste of fame, was how it was right there on Hollywood Boulevard, and it was like, just blocks from Grauman's Chinese and just across the street from the Egyptian, and it was like, this place where people would go, and it became a Hollywood attraction, which then spread it to other people, like ripping off that idea and all that.
Right.
Right. So
And
yeah,
what, now it's a DSW shoe store?
yeah.
Now it's condominiums.
Yeah,
I think.
luxury
Condos,
condos that no one lives in.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there's been kind of a Hollywood connection from the very beginning, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's I think that is kind of the connection to so many films that were made around the time. I think these films were fun to watch because of how they connected to America's just obsession with Polynesia.
Well, but that's it sounds fascinating. I mean, and it sounds like you guys have already gotten a bunch of interviews kind of going. How far out are you with everything?
We're probably, with these interviews that we have to go out and get, we should be able to have a rough cut of the film done. Like, our timeline is to have a rough cut of the film done by the end of this year.
Great.
That's the goal. Yeah, there's still maybe some.
There's a lot of post stuff we want to do too.
There's a lot of post stuff. Yeah, there's
That's when you guys got to do the maps from Kon-Tiki.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think some of the cool things that came together that really made us be like, oh crap, we're making a movie is we got this interview that Donn did in 87, Max?
I think it was 87, or I think it was recorded in 86, and the transcripts were available in 87 or something like that.
Yeah. So once we got a hold of these tapes and we had Donn essentially narrating the documentary, we were like, oh,
Wow.
Holy crap, like this is a real documentary. Now
Comes
we
to
have
life.
to actually like go out and interview people and make this happen. That was kind of, I think, the first big thing where, because we were still kind of like toying with the idea of doing this during the quarantine. And when we heard back from the Wadamole Foundation that they found the tapes and they were sending them to us, we were like, oh, well, now like we kind of have a responsibility to
Right.
follow through
Do
with
this
this.
the right way,
Yeah. I think that, to me, that was the biggest thing. I don't know about you, Max.
No, that was a big deal, and it was also we knew so little at that point, and we're not really that well connected to anybody in this community. So that was sort of a big deal, and we're like, and then being able to listen to that stuff of Donn basically telling his own life story.
Yeah.
It was like, oh wow, this is. I think people will be into it.
Yeah, and then I mean, as far as being in that community, the community has been super welcoming to us and super open to sharing everything that they can with us. Maybe those tapes helped a little bit to be like, oh, these guys are serious.
I think it gave us a little street cred.
A little bit of street cred, maybe. But like, yeah, what's crazy is like we were talking about it the other day, and we're like, at this point, we're probably like 2 of maybe 5 people who know all these things about this one guy.
Right.
At this point, like, because everybody knows the stories that they know, but as far as what actually happened and what he says happened, we're pretty well versed, and I would say we're pretty sure we have the story at this point.
Excellent.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. I guess we'll definitely be putting a link to your Kickstarter in the description and everything. But is there anything else you guys wanted to say on that front? Or where can everyone follow you? How about that?
The Donn of Tiki, 2 N's in Donn.
Yeah.
The Donn of Tiki on Instagram, donnoftiki.com, Donn of Tiki on Twitter, the Donn of Tiki on the Donn. The Donn of Tiki on everything. It'll work.
On everything.
Yeah.
Sounds
Perfect.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It
you
was
guys
great
for having
you
us.
on again, Alex, and great to meet you, Max.
Yeah,
This was awesome.
likewise. Thanks for having us on. That was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. And thanks for everybody watching all of South Pacific, even after the intermission.
All right, next week, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects ever. We're going to be talking about alien encounters in movies, but of the more peaceful kind, I would say. Not so much an alien invasion movie.
Yeah, well, we'll have to keep looking to the skies. Truth is out there.
Yeah, and
I want to believe.
yeah, I mean, at this point, it's beyond I want to believe. I just want to know because it's clearly out there, and I think it's a June 15th or something that the government or the Pentagon owes Congress a big bulletin of exactly what UFOs are. Yeah, big what the fuck. We'll be talking about 3 Alien Encounters films. These are some of the best here. Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977, Contact from 1997, and Arrival from 2016. I really wanted to say like 2017 there, so we had 7s in all the years, but these are great movies. This is a great block. Was this part of the government coming out and saying that UAPs are now a real thing and that we need to...
Yeah, right. They changed the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like brought it to the top of the heap here. But, this one was kind of percolating in the background. I kind of had it on a running list we're keeping of different movies, and I think it'll be a fun one to kind of explore. And it's kind of a different way of looking at the alien encounters.
Absolutely. Very excited. All right, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
That darn Bally High. Why does it have to be off limits? You can get everything over there. Dancing, drinking, everything.